That bill was passed a couple of years ago, and the task force just came together within the last few months to look at it. And as we've been examining minority contracting opportunities with the state, some very, well, I would say they're startling, but the reality is that that's just the way it's been. In terms of the numbers, in terms of contracts made available and the dollars that are spent with African American businesses. So that process has been bringing agency directors in front of us to ask them about putting together plans to move it forward. So first of all, there needs to be an acknowledgement that it's bad, and it's clearly bad. The black community lags woefully behind in terms of access to contracts in the state, and we are losing that battle to white women, which has become the kind of the crutch, if I can call it that, for minority business opportunities. Simple as that. Those prime contractors that are predominantly white who don't want to do business with black businesses try to fulfill their minority contracting requirements by using white women businesses. Some of them they create in order to then push the dollars in those directions. So we are lagging woefully behind in terms of that effort. And all we hear from the state agency directors is that we need to do better. Well, I challenged the Illinois Department of Corrections director in our last meeting that he's been there for 3 years, and I've heard him for 3 years say we need to do better. Well, at what point are we going to do better? There have been a number of bills passed by myself and others standing behind me, as well as Senator James Claiborne, that are actively trying to, through legislative action, create the opportunities for African American businesses. And the reality, it shouldn't have to be that. We should know that black businesses exist in the state, and every effort with our agency director should be taken to make sure that we are equitably distributing the opportunities among black businesses. If you look at the numbers based on the BEP reports that come out, you can see that you have multi-million-dollar agencies, $100 million agencies, billion-dollar agencies, and in most cases, less than 10% of the appropriate spend is being done with black businesses. And that's across the board in all of our agencies, and it's very shameful. So again, if the governor says that he's done more, well, what has he done? Becomes the question. Now, this task force is going to become a commission, but that commission is not going to become available until next year. So if he's talking about something that's going to happen at the beginning of the year, again, it hasn't done anything yet. We haven't done anything. The commission hasn't done anything to try to make business opportunities better for black businesses. The percentages are there, and we recognize that when you give dollars and resources to black businesses, they hire in our community. So again, if you want to improve unemployment in our community, then make the opportunities more available to black businesses. So as we look at, again, the record, and these are his agency directors that are aggressively and actively working to try to make sure that opportunities don't exist, and all they can tell us is that they need to do better. Well, the time for talk is over. So again, if he's talking about what he's done, again, the record is clear. He hasn't done anything to help black businesses in the state of Illinois, and we'll see what happens in the future, but without the actions of the Black Caucus standing behind me, you know, we constantly fight for resources, we constantly fight for capital dollars to make sure that black businesses have opportunities, and what we've consistently seen is that the governor shifts money around. He shifts money around. He doesn't spend it where the budget or the action suggests that he should spend it. He does what he wants to do, and clearly what he's been doing is not spending it on black businesses and not directly helping the African American community.
Thank you, Will. And I'd like to just add to that, under the governor's administration, the waiver process has been used more than it has been used under any other administration. When we look at minority goals and set-asides, it's so easy for his administration just to tell those primes to just go to the waiver process. There are no black businesses. No one can do this job. And they've been approved across the board. They are not meeting 20%, 25%, 10% set-asides in none of the agencies. Maybe just the Toll Authority and Capital Development Board, maybe those two agencies out of all of the agencies that have the bulk of the budget. Department of Corrections, it's not happening there. It's not happening in Human Services, DCFS, or no other place that is needed. So the waiver process is where you ought to take a peek, and you'll see this administration's support in minority goals. So when you don't have a state budget, there's an impact. There's a trickle-down effect that goes to and lends to local government. We've been joined by Alderman Sawyer and Alderman Mitts. Sawyer is the chairman of the Aldermanic Black Caucus, because some of those things that the governor has talked about, we hear from our colleagues all the time on, hey, we have this impact, we're struggling, we're suffering, our budget is devastated because of lack of your budget. So I'd like for them to share with you some of their experiences as well. Alderman.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing us to be here today. First of all, I want to thank the Legislative Black Caucus for standing up for us down here in the era where we have someone like Bruce Rauner devastating the black community. And it's absolutely correct. When these effects come forward, and it directly affects our communities. When I see my next door neighbor who's a daycare operator close to going out of business, it affects all of us. When we see schools not being funded, and we have to go on a local level to do things that are tough just to make our budgets work. You know, we know that's because of the lack of leadership at the top of the governor's office. I was listening to Governor Rauner in the morning as I was getting ready for work yesterday, and heard that statement and really couldn't believe it. And as I got to work, as I checked my social media feeds, there were statements out there as if it were fact that he was almost the savior of black people. I immediately put something out, and I really can't say it in public, but I put a one-word response, and it was, let's just say it was poppycock. And I just could not believe it. So when Governor Rauner's talking about going down in history as probably the best governor for African Americans, I say that he's going to go down in history as probably the worst governor in the state of Illinois. And I say that, and we've had governors that have gone to jail. And I'll say that we've had more effective governors that have gone to jail than Bruce Rauner. So I want to, again, thank the Black Caucus for standing up and having our backs, because this does affect us locally on a very personal level, from the MAP grants, from the lack of CPS funding, from the elimination of child care assistance. All of this affects us on the local level. And if it wasn't for the Black Caucus to continue that fight, who knows where we would be right now. So again, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Chair of the West Side elected officials, Emma Mintz.
Thank you. And I am Emma Mintz, 37th Ward Alderman. I chair the West Side Black elected officials. And I'm here today, and as I hear my colleagues speak of the governor, it reminds me when the governor appeared in city council. And one thing stuck with me. When he first came, he said he was going to work, it was our job for all of us to work together. Well, I have not seen the governor. Now, if we're going to work together, the city of Chicago do sit within the state of Illinois. We are elected officials. Another thing about our governor is that he came out to my ward at an event and didn't even acknowledge the fact that I was there. So how are you going to work with me? And if you disrespect me, I surely can't believe you have no love for my community. I don't see it. And he was there on a day of trying to say he was doing something for the community, but it really wasn't, because parents was there saying they had to quit work because their kids, they didn't have anyone to take care of the kids. Piecemealing. It's easy for a person to talk. It's much difficult for you to walk the walk. That's right. And we need him to put some action. Well, he don't have to put none now. He done had too long. Too much suffering for my community. Too much suffering. And yes, we get the burden of it, but the truth of the matter is that we haven't had a budget. Funding have to come from someplace, and if you're decreasing little simple mathematics, then it clearly show you we're losing, and it's the blacks that's losing. And we as blacks are going to make sure that we won't lose come November. That's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Representative Juliana Stratton has been graciously waiting and need to attend another meeting, but it was really important for her to highlight some of the challenges that she's witnessed and experienced as well under this administration as a member of the caucus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Juliana Stratton, 5th District. Bruce Rauner's statement was more than factually false. It was appalling and it was incredibly insulting. Juneteenth is about our freedom, our liberation, and our fight for economic justice, which continues to this day. And Bruce Rauner has done nothing but turn the clock back on our communities. These comments come from a governor who vetoed a $15 minimum wage and even suggested getting rid of it entirely. This is a governor who presides over the state with the highest black unemployment rate in the nation. And this is a governor whose 736-day budget crisis decimated black and brown communities. Bruce Rauner's manufactured budget crisis forced a quarter of the state's small business centers to shutter their doors. His manufactured budget crisis slashed funding for critical services that black families rely upon. And this governor's manufactured budget crisis held funding for our schools hostage, pitted communities against each other, and demonized our families. This is a failed governor who has taken every opportunity to hurt communities of color while ignoring our calls for investment and equity. We don't want to be pandered to. We don't want proclamations made about us. We want policies to be made with us and for us by a leader who listens and cares. And that is not Bruce Rauner. Thank you.
Thank you. We've been joined by another member of the caucus who has worked really hard in criminal justice reform issues and in fact was the actual sponsor of the death penalty. I'm glad that he was able to make it on today with his busy schedule across the state, Senator Kwame Rauner.
Thank you, Kim. I think members have said it well. I spoke to Governor Rauner 7 days after he was elected, and we talked about criminal justice reform and how it impacted the African American community. And to his credit, he appointed a criminal justice reform commission. However, when the recommendations were going to be put forth to put into law, Governor Rauner and his Republican colleagues began to back off of the very reforms that were recommended by the commission that he appointed. The chair of the commission is now his chief of staff, and he and I were both surprised by the actions to back off of these reforms. With regards to business opportunity and economic opportunity in the African American community, it's been held hostage as the entire state has been held hostage by Governor Rauner's inability to sign a budget until his 4th year as chief executive. That's a dereliction of duty. He increased the debt of the state, and everybody knows when it drizzles in most communities, it downpours in the African American community, and that's what's the result of Bruce Rauner's lack of leadership.
Thank you, Kwame. So I'd just like to wrap up by just reinstating just facts that the governor has released false claims that he's in support of the black community. As the chairman of the Black Caucus, we have reached out to the governor on a number of initiatives, including training programs, weatherization, capital needs in our community, and he would always just throw at us his turnaround agenda. He's more concerned about turning the state red, ridding the unions, right to work. These are the things that the governor has worked hard towards, not to assist the Black community. Our communities has suffered as a result of the impasse, and he's pitted children against children across the state. This is not an effort to show that he's working with the Black Caucus, by no means. Is there any questions?
I do have a question. When was the last time you met with him, or how frequently have you met with him?
We initially began to meet with the governor while we were in session. He invited us over to the governor's mansion in his first year for a breakfast meeting, and he literally threw his turnaround agenda to us and said, take it or leave it. That was our very first encounter as a Senate Black Caucus. Then we had separate meetings with him all throughout his first year, his second year. We began to realize that he would say things to us and he had no follow through. It was all just a dog and pony show. His state budget address, every time he comes out with his the state address or the state budget address, we knew that it was disingenuous. Nothing that we put forth he ever supported. We did not meet with him any this year. We felt no need to meet with him. Rank and file members at this point had to take charge. Even Republican leadership cannot deal with this guy. They began to put together a budget, which we finally passed this year from the work that Christine Redonio had done with President Cullerton. And so the work efforts became amongst rank and file members just to have a budget. A lot of the funding that you see there, the Black Caucus was able to put for after-school programs and youth jobs wasn't because the governor supported anything that we were doing. It was because our colleagues supported what we were trying to accomplish for our communities. So we have not met with that man any in 2018.
Okay, no meetings in 2018.
It's unnecessary. He wasn't meeting with his own leadership. If the governor can't sit down and meet with the leaders of both the chambers, it's just a poor situation that we're in.
Yeah, so he hasn't really met with other caucuses either, do you know?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. Any more questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.